treated well. And this is a continuation of the treat for you from the men's ministry department. Yes. So we figured what better gift that we can give the women of our church but women's health, total wellness. And so the program today is really focused on that, looking at all aspects of wellness. Physical wellness, we have a gynecologist. Social-emotional wellness, we have 2 mental health professionals. Financial wellness, we have a financial expert. And spiritual wellness, we have our very own elder. So we have all the components connected. And there will be a time when you can ask some questions. Please, your questions and comments, keep them brief so we can get more information out. All right? All right. To begin with, as always, we begin with prayer. So everyone please stand so we can pray. Eternal Father, eternal God, we thank you for the privilege of being alive, recognizing that this day is made possible because of you. So we give you all the praise and honor and glory that you deserve. We ask for the presence of your Holy Spirit to lead and guide us. We ask, Lord, that the information that is provided may be useful, and that perspectives and behaviors may change, and that, Father, that our women will gain total wellness. We ask these blessings in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you. So I'd let the panelists introduce themselves. I see some folks trickling in. Now, although this is about total women's wellness, I do invite us men to pay attention and to listen, because we contribute to women's wellness. The other thing, too, is that thinking about the women that are here, your wellness affects the wellness of the family, of the home. And so this is really all-encompassing. We believe that doing this work will impact not just you, but also the home in its entirety. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, who will introduce themselves and take us right through the presentation.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carolyn Aladenika. Professionally, I am a product manager where I work with youth banking financial products. But for the purposes of this presentation, I serve as an elder here, and I'm also the AY leader of this church.
Good afternoon. My name is Sani Lubin Holder. I am here in the capacity today as a financial specialist. I coined the phrase financial lifestyle strategist. That's what I do. I help people live their best financial life, get to and through retirement, and so that's what I'll be talking about today.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. My name is Dr. Sophia Lubin. I am a gynecologist. I am also the host of a podcast called the Dr. Sophia OBGYN podcast. And hopefully I get a chance to just enlighten all of us on a few women's health issues as we go through our lives. I do have one disclaimer, and that is that as a gynecologist, I do speak openly about women's intimate parts. So if anyone feels uncomfortable hearing a conversation that has to do with female genitalia and female sexual health, I will let you know just before making that part of the conversation. If anyone would like to step out, or if there are any children in the room that you would like to not be involved in the conversation.
I am Jennifer Tranquil. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm one of the mental health professionals on the panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer as well. Jennifer Wilshire. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. I am a relationship expert, a coach, and a speaker. And my focus today is to really enlighten and encourage us to be mindful about breaking relationship toxic patterns within ourselves and with other people. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
Okay, so I guess it starts with me. Our first, basically, age group, and this is an area where if you are feeling a little bit sensitive about speaking about women's genital parts, anyone who feels uncomfortable can step out. But we're going to start with from birth to 11 now. Of course, from birth to 11, the only part of the situation in that age group that I'm involved in is when you are delivering. But otherwise, from birth to 11 years old, there is actually no real reason for a child, a female child, to have to see someone like me as a gynecologist. However, it is very important that we also are openly having this conversation about our girls. Why? Because I want for us to have language that is open and honest language about our bodies. And that is something that should start from being very small. It means that when you have your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old who is exploring and trying to understand their body parts, that we're not using language such as the pocketbook, or we're using language such as down there, that we are clearly saying words like, this is your vagina, this is your vulva, this is your body, and to understand that it is okay for them to have curiosity and that it is okay for them to use the right words and terminology when we're speaking about our bodies. Also, this is an opportunity for us to really encourage our young girls to start to understand the concept of embrace your body and embrace yourself. That is one of my mottos. It's part of the podcast, and it starts even at this young age. So that way, when girls are feeling a way about things going on in their bodies, that they feel comfortable to come to you, their parents, and express to you exactly what's going on, whether it's a tummy ache or whether it's because they fell at school and maybe injured themselves. Because in this age group, when a little girl is learning how to ride a bike, or she's climbing monkey bars and doing all the things that children do, that they may have injuries to this part of their body, and we want them to feel very comfortable to let us know that something may have happened. Also, this may be the time in their, where the kids are exploring, and we may have them, meet with their friends or go to other family members, and we want our children to always feel comfortable to come and tell us if anything that is not correct, or that they have been perhaps maybe touched in an inappropriate way, that they can use the language and feel comfortable in order to come and speak to us. And so 0 to 11, these are parts of the things that I want us to really focus on. That's one. Secondly, is healthy eating habits. If we start that from young, then we will be able to carry that through to adulthood and beyond. So this is a very good time to start to encourage our children to understand the difference between healthy snacks, such as fruits, such as vegetables, versus sugary snacks. This is the time that our children need to get used to regular checkups, meaning going to their pediatrician and going to things like their dentist and not feeling afraid. We have to support a healthy relationship with our medical providers so that children don't feel scared when they're going to the pediatrician or when they're going to the dentist. And again, it's all about introducing a healthy lifestyle from young. So what does that mean? It means encouraging and fostering an environment for sports and exercise so that children always feel like it's a part of their daily activity. This is going to help to mitigate a lot of other problems that can arise in the future, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, problems with their menstrual cycles, etc. Also, it's to understand that as we get closer to the puberty age, we're going to get to that stage, but for us, especially in this country, that age seems to be getting younger and younger. So where the average age of a woman, of a young girl going through her period is typically around age 12, In this country, it could be as early as 9. Okay? And so again, it's having the conversation that starts at home. We have to remember that education always starts at home. We should not be waiting for it to be from the school or the first time that a little girl is hearing about the concept of getting her first period, that is happening when she goes to a doctor's visit or from her friends. So these are some of the things in terms of how we are going to treat our little girls so that they always feel connected to you, their parents, in a healthy, shameless way. All right, I think I'll take it over.
Hey, so we're going to get into psychosocial wellness. So research has found that in women, it's more common for them to be diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and eating disorder. But we know the story does not start there, so we're going to look at the psychosocial impact on a woman's development. So here we have Erik Erikson's, or an image of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development that came out in the 1950s. And it basically explains the different stages that we go through as we develop. And we're going to look at each stage today. So for infancy to childhood, think of 4 categories that we're trying to optimize. We're trying to establish trust, autonomy, initiative, and industry, or competency. So let's start with the first one, and that is infancy, that's trust. So will my basic needs for nourishment and affection be met? And what's key during this phase is their relationship, their attunement, their attachment to their primary caregiver. So if their primary caregiver is reliable, is consistent and nurturing, then you will have a child that is trusting of themselves and of the world. However, if your caregiver is inconsistent or lacks affection, then you have a child who thinks that the world is not safe, and they struggle with intimacy. So then we transition to attachment styles. So another theory, another psychoanalyst, John Bowlby, came up with the theory of attachment. You'll see on the screen, it says secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful. And we're just going to go through each stage that happens as you're developing. So let's start with secure. So secure is if your primary caregiver was positive, responsive to your needs. So the child would respond where if the caregiver leaves, they're distressed, obviously because that attachment's there, but when they come back, they're comforted. So children who have secure attachment, they grow to develop healthy relationships. They can regulate their emotions, they can manage conflict better, and they have low anxiety and low emotional avoidance. Then we'll go to the next one, avoidant. So for an avoidant attachment, the primary caregiver may be dismissive, which in result, when the caregiver leaves, there's no distress, and when the caregiver returns, there's no response to that either way because they've been dismissive. So children who had this type of attachment or relationship growing up, they tend to be more independent. They tend to have patterns of withdrawal, specifically emotional withdrawal. They tend to minimize their feelings and the feelings of others, and they tend to have a preference for casual relationships. They have low anxiety and high emotional avoidance. Then there's anxious or ambivalent attachment. So if you have this attachment, that means that your caregiver was inconsistent. Sometimes they did it, sometimes they didn't. And they can't really trust that who you are is going to stay the same. This child or this young person, they're in distress when the caregiver leaves, but they're not comforted when the caregiver comes back either way. And these people grow up to crave close relationships. They need and struggle for trust. They need constant reassurance, and they may have feelings of anxiety and jealousy in their relationships. So they have low avoidance and high anxiety. And the last one is disorganized, where unfortunately that's when the caregiver was abusive or neglect. So when the caregiver returns, you may see them being fearful And these people tend to struggle in intimate relationships. It tend to be a little bit more confusing for them. They have a tendency towards aggression and antisocial behavior, and they have high avoidance and anxiety. So then we look at early childhood, and during this phase, we're trying to establish autonomy and initiative. During this stage, you're being potty trained, you're learning how to tie your shoe, you may be picking out your own clothes, and you're trying to explore and be independent. So if during this stage your caregivers were encouraged this exploration, this independence, supported it, and if they tolerated your mistakes patiently, then you would establish this. However, on the flip side, if your caregiver was overly controlling, or if they rushed the process or criticized you, then you would establish shame, doubt, and guilt, and lack of confidence. And this tends to be a little bit higher in women because with young girls, parents tend to hover more and not allow them to establish independence or initiative, so they tend to protect them a little bit more, and that stints their confidence. So as a parent, you want to balance safety, but you also want to allow them to take that initiative, because when they get older and they're at work or they're giving a presentation, then they may have that same, shame and doubt because they were never given that space to do that. And then the glory years. Wasn't this fun? School age, 7 to 11, we're trying to establish industry, meaning competency. So you're starting school, and you're dealing with social comparisons and academic comparisons, and you're learning to deal with and filter out evaluation and failure. You're learning to be competent and accountable, and the balance for this stage is to make sure that your young girls are accountable and that they're competent, but not develop an inferiority complex. So you don't want them to be performative and think that's the only thing that contributes to their value, is if they bring home an A, because if they're not bringing home A's and they're not getting that stuff, then they're gonna feel they have no value. So it's not to be so extreme, or if they failed exam, they're not saying, I'm a failure. That was just one exam, you're not a failure. So this is around that time that you navigate evaluation, dealing with failure, dealing with feedback. And I cannot talk about this stage without mentioning very briefly the most commonly diagnosed in this stage would be ADHD for children. And it's seen slightly differently in girls. So studies show, and there can be biases to this as well, but they find that in girls, ADHD is not it's not diagnosed as easily because they're not seen as being so disruptive. So they may not be running around the church. Their hyperactivity may be excessive talking or exaggerated emotions. So it shows differently, but it's there, and it can be tied to anxiety and depression. And that's just showing the difference between inattentive versus hyperactivity. And there are some interventions available for you if you do have ADHD, so I list some there: behavior modification, environmental modification. There are school-based accommodations if you have an IEP, individual education plan, or a 504 plan. You can have accommodations for this. And lastly, for this section, I want to talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So the CDC Kaiser did some research in the 90s about potentially traumatic events in childhood, and this was the largest investigation of childhood abuse and neglect and household dysfunction. And what they found from this investigation was that ACEs are common across all populations, so there's not a population that says they don't have this, but also a substantial amount of society has experienced at least one of the things on the screen. So you see the stuff on the screen, it's physical, emotional, or sexual abuse and neglect, mental illness in the household, so someone in the household has mental illness, incarceration of a relative, domestic violence in the household, substance use or abuse in the household, or divorce or separation. So those are considered adverse childhood experiences, and they impact how you develop and how you grow. There are also social determinants of health: access to health care and quality, access to community and neighborhood, economic stability, education, quality education. So for the young girls during this stage, just some protective factors and some tips. We would say for the parents, you would promote healthy social norms in your household, no violence, high parent engagement, take advantage of strong starts. So if there's an academic program that you can get them in as early as possible, you want to take advantage of that. Social emotional learning, you want to intervene quickly to lessen harm if something did happen, and you want to strengthen economics, strengthen communities, and faith. Your faith is a protective factor. For the girls, take advantage of your safe and positive social supports. You have a lot of them, so look around. Take initiative. Don't stop if you fail during this time. That's just one failure. You keep going. Keep trying new things. It helps to build your confidence, even if you're scared. And try not to excessively compare yourself to others or overgeneralize your academic evaluations.
Thank you. All right, so I'll be covering just a few tidbits about finances as it relates to children at this age. So between the ages of 7 and 11, it's important for our children to understand how money works, have conversations about money. This is a time where children are actually going to develop their relationship with money. Just as we mentioned for the other panelists here, this age is crucial to development of their relationships, their ideas, and the way that they think about things. And so it's the same thing for money. They'll develop a relationship with money. They'll develop habits around money at this age. And so it's also important for them to understand what money is, how it works, how it's used. And so at this point, it's very good to, make sure they know how to count money and count in general, right? But they're going to learn that in school. But count money, understand, change and, having a transaction, things like that. Understanding simple debt, so if your kids go to the store and they want to buy something for $6, but they only have $5, okay, well, I'll give you that $1, but you got to give it back next week when you get your allowance. Mm-hmm. So these are the little things you kind of have to start teaching them so they understand. And then also ways to save. So whether it's, giving them a piggy bank or, having a little bank book for them to save some money in, different things, basically to show them that there are ways for them to also be able to put away a little something for themselves, understanding a rainy day fund, right? A little emergency fund for when they want to do something special for someone in their family. So those are some of the things that you want to make sure that the children understand. And even at that early age of 7 to 11, it's important for them to understand budgeting. And the reason why it's so important is because as you grow older, budgeting is probably the biggest the biggest tool in your toolbox when it comes to finances. You will know, probably many people in this room, that if you don't budget well, everything else goes downhill, right? So it's a very simple habit to create, and it's something that you can start very small with them to understand. If they get an allowance or they receive money for maybe a birthday or a holiday or something like that, giving them a goal, or not even giving it to them, have them develop their own goal for this money that they have, and then budgeting that thing accordingly. So when you teach that at this early age, 7 to 11, just imagine they keep practicing this all their lives. So the next thing is, how do you prepare a child at this time? And you allow them to practice all these skills. So you're going to allow them to make the transaction at the grocery store. You're going to explain to them, like, you have to exchange money for this service or for these goods. You're going to allow them to practice that. You're going to allow them to, can't read that right here, but let me just unlock my phone because my glasses are just not that good. All right, so you're going to give them those examples of debt and interest and things like that. At this early age, you're going to give examples that they can relate to, right? So like I said, whether it's borrowing $1, so that they can make their purchase. Examples of savings, like I said, different ways, whether it's a piggy bank or a bank account, things like that. And then the budgeting exercises, like I said, if it's around like, Mother's Day, you want to make sure the kids get something nice for their parent. You want to give them an idea like, hey, this is your budget to be able to get something for mom, and then have them come back and bring you some ideas like, hey, I saw these things that I'd like to get. Is this in the price range of things that I can get, So you're going to keep practicing these things with them. These are the little things you do every single day to help them towards the basic skill that they're going to need as an adult when it comes to finances. And we'll get a lot more into the full scope of things, but this is obviously for just the younger generation, and just as they start to learn about money, these are some of the really basic principles they have to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Caroline.
All right, so we've talked about physical health, we've talked about financial health, and we've also talked about mental health. So we're going to journey through, thank you. We're going to journey through spiritual health. All right, so spiritual health differs a little bit from the format that we've been talking about so far, because spiritual health doesn't necessarily have an age. There are some people who are in their 70s who haven't yet come to Christ, and there are some people who are in their 20s who are on fire for Christ, right? So we're going to take a look at this journey to spiritual health, and it says the Christian journey to spiritual health is not a linear process, but rather a dynamic and ongoing relationship with God, characterized by growth, intimacy, and dependence on Him. So in step 1, you have the conversion phase, where you have learned about Christ and have decided to give your life to Him, followed by the infancy and the new believer phase. So that's the phase where you have given your life to Christ, you're a new believer, and you are learning things very rapidly. And so you're deciding where you fall on the spectrum of faith, you are strengthening your faith, and you're still in infancy, and in that phase, you're still learning and absorbing very quickly. Then you move on to stage 3, which is the growth and discipleship phase. So this is a very important phase because it has to tie into the very last phase, which is spiritual parenthood and mentoring, as well as legacy and impact. There is such a need for spiritual development, growth, and discipleship at this phase. You need others who are stronger in the faith to have an impact on you. You need to be learning from people who are older than you, people who have been longer in the faith than you have been. And that's such a necessity and something that we can't skip in our spiritual journey. So then we move to step 4, which is fruitfulness and ministry. So as you learn about your faith, you figure out where you fall on the spectrum of faith, you are then becoming fruitful. So you may join a ministry in your church, women's ministry, men's ministry. You decide that you want to take that next step to help others and to get involved. Then there's the 5th stage of maturity and Christ-likeness. So you are maturing in your faith. You may even be a mentor to others at this stage. And you are continuing to learn and continuing to be discipled as well during this phase. So then this is something that none of us can avoid, but there is the suffering and testing, which leads to number 7, which is perseverance and endurance. And this is truly where your faith is tested. So you've been on fire, you've been learning different things, you've decided that you want to follow Christ, but then there comes a time when your faith is tested. Maybe things don't necessarily go your way. Maybe you lose a loved one, and you are tested in some way that then leads you to be able to persevere and endure through that test and move on to being someone who can mentor others as well. So for our journey to spiritual health, we're going to look at infancy and childhood, and in this section, we're going to take a look at some character profiles from the Bible of people who fall within these age groups and see how they thrived in these age groups through their spiritual journey. Right? So our first character is Josiah, and for his profile, his gender is male, his age is 8, his location was the kingdom of Judah. And King Josiah was known for his reforms in Judah. He became king at the age of 8 and implemented many religious reforms, purging idolatry and restoring worship of God. He also initiated the repair of the temple in Jerusalem. So I'm just going to read 2 verses for you. It comes from 2 Kings, chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. And it says, Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedidiah, the daughter of Adiah of Boscath. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the way of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. So these verses tell me that he was spiritually strong, and so I gave him a health score. So for physical health and for mental health, that's around like 75, 80% for both. And the reason that I gave that score is because he was still 8 years old, so still developing. There was still time for him to grow physically and mentally. Financially, I gave him a score between 95 and... Okay. Yes, between 95 and 100, because he did have financial advisors at the time who were able to advise him. And according to scripture, he was willing to learn and had many advisors who were helping to lead him and develop him into the king that he was to be. And then spiritual health gave him about 100. And this was, for many reasons that we'll get into, things that he did within the kingdom to transform the kingdom that he was ruling. All right, so he was known for several significant accomplishments. Religious reforms, he initiated extensive religious reforms throughout the kingdom of Judah, aiming to rid the land of idolatry and reinstate the worship of God. He restored the temple. He oversaw the repair and restoration of the temple in Jerusalem, which had fallen into despair because of neglect and misuse. He expanded his military through military conquest, reclaiming lands lost during previous reigns. And overall, he's remembered as a righteous and reformative king who led Judah back to obedience to God's law during a period of spiritual decline. So this just tells me that no matter what age you are, you can have such great impact for Christ. And so from him, we can learn several valuable lessons. One is faithfulness to God. His commitment to following God's commandments, even when it was unpopular and challenging, teaches all of us the importance of staying faithful to our core beliefs and our values. He led by example. He didn't just dictate reforms, but he actively participated in them and led by example. And leaders can inspire change by demonstrating the behaviors that they expect from others. He taught us humility and teachability. He was 8 years old when he rose to the throne. So his humility is evident in his response to the rediscovery of the law. He didn't let pride prevent him from acknowledging his kingdom's shortcomings, and we should remain open to learning and humble in admitting when we've gone astray. And lastly, he left a legacy of righteousness. His legacy teaches us that one person's commitment to righteousness can have such a profound impact even long after they're gone. Our actions today can shape the world for generations to come. So we have so much that we can learn from Josiah, King Josiah, whether we are men or women, learning about our spiritual growth and desiring to be close to God, even at the early age of 8. So pass it back.
Okay, me again. It's my turn. So here we're going into adolescence. We're discovering our girls and women from the ages of 12 to 18. And perhaps this may be the first encounter that a young girl has with a gynecologist, but still, the primary medical provider in this age group should still be the pediatrician. So a reason why a young girl, 12 to 18, may come to see someone like me as a gynecologist would be because of extreme issues, perhaps, with a menstrual cycle. So it's normal for young girls, when they get their first menstrual cycle, that the first 2 years that their menstrual cycles can be irregular. Their menstrual cycles can come every month, they can come every 3 months, they can come every 6 months. But over the 2-year period, it does start to become a regular pattern. Part of the discussion or the conversation around menstrual cycles should be had again at home. That first introduction to what is it that's going to happen, the changes that are going to be happening in their bodies should start from their mom and even from their dads in terms of what to expect in, breast changes, body changes, that they're going to grow in height, that they're going to maybe have some emotional changes that may happen, and then, of course, that very first period. We want to make sure that our young girls, when they get their first period, that is not a time for them to feel ashamed, but rather a time for them to be celebrated, that they have now transitioned into what we would term perhaps as womanhood. Not yet women, but it is an opportunity for us to celebrate what it means to be a woman. And having our periods is that first opportunity to do that. And so if we have the right conversation around it, then young girls then can feel very much empowered, not only in their bodies and understanding what some of the changes that are happening, but rather so that going forward, when things are happening with their periods, such as heavy periods, such as painful periods, that they are able to have language and conversation around it that they can bring to their parents and their medical providers so that way we can address those issues. That's one. 2, this is an opportunity for us to talk about body image and the things that surround healthy eating. Again, I cannot stress this enough because this is the phase where a lot of young girls tend to feel different emotional feelings about their new bodies. They now have breasts that they did not have. They have filled out. They may have hips that never existed before. And oftentimes they put on weight or lose weight. Sometimes they're losing a lot of that baby fat, and then they're putting on weight in areas of their bodies that feel very much unknown. And so again, this is an opportunity for us to have the right conversation about what we're eating, how we're eating, and having significant exercise in our lives and in our daily lives, so that way we can have better emotional, mental, and physical stability. So again, from 12 to 18, the conversation is a bigger part around puberty. Things like acne, again, reminding young girls that this is a temporary phase and that it is a part of normal growth and growing up. And also, if a young girl is experiencing extremes in things such as acne, that it seems like maybe affecting her self-esteem, that we are addressing her in a very graceful and caring way so that she then has a lot more grace with herself. The understanding that this is a normal part of life, and if it is extreme, that we actually bring that to the attention of either the pediatrician, a dermatologist, or going to the right provider that can help them. And it could be something as simple as how they're washing their face, the kind of products that they're using. It could be something as simple as drinking more water. It could be something as simple as what they're eating, taking away a lot of the sugary snacks that they may be eating in terms of how their skin is reacting. Lastly, again, this is the time to now start to introduce the conversation of sexual health, understanding that we have to start that conversation around our girls so that they feel very confident about their bodies and therefore don't have to feel any pressure, whether that's peer pressure, environmental pressure, social pressures around this time. And being very honest with the conversation about the changes and the things that they are feeling in their bodies. We have to remember that our girls, we don't want them to be one person when they come to church and a different person when they're outside. We want us to always feel like we are the same. And so if we're not having an open and honest conversation and true goals, and I don't want to say expectations, because you want your girls to feel like they can come to those decisions on their own, whether it's through their faith, whether it's through the community that they are involved in, and certainly that they always feel supported in whatever their decisions are, that we allow them to make decisions that are going to be right for them, and in showing them that in a way that is graceful, allows them to feel empowered. So from 12 to 18, just to recap, yes, of course, there's a lot of physical things that are happening. And of course, I'm going to take it over and pass it on to our mental health experts. But that in the physical things, that this is a stage that they can still see their pediatrician. No need to see a gynecologist yet, unless they're having extremes of certain issues, such as extreme things in their puberty, with menstrual cycles, perhaps acne and things of that nature. Okay.
So you already introduced the next, for psychosocial, the next stage, well, speaking of coming into your own. So the optimal psychosocial development milestone during adolescence is identity, establishing your own identity, your own interests, values, goals, and sense of purpose. So during this phase, young women will explore. They'll tend to try on different roles within their peer groups that allows them to discover who they are. So if you see them, you say, I thought last week you said your favorite color was this. Didn't you say that you like this group? No, I don't like them anymore. So they're trying on different roles within their group to figure out who they are. So in the previous phase, we spoke about the importance of the parent and of teachers and school staff, because they're trying to gain your affection and your attention. That all goes out the window once we get to adolescence. So social relationships, peer social relationships, are moved to the forefront. There's more of an emphasis on social acceptance and more value on the opinions of their peers over the parents and the adults. And the way your peers treat you, young ladies, impacts your sense of self and your identity formation. So the peer group that you're selecting has to be a healthy peer group, or it's going to impact your own identity. So you're more likely to form a strong, positive identity and if you feel accepted and valued. However, if you have a social group where you feel marginalized or disrespected or not included, that can lead to role confusion. And some people are still there, unfortunately. So let's talk a little bit about unhealthy peer relationships. So since in this stage, there's high emphasis on peer acceptance, that leaves young women open to, unfortunately, bullying and peer pressure during this phase. So it's crucial, again, for adolescents to not only have healthy peer groups, but also maintain their supportive social networks with healthy, safe adults. Adults, during this phase, it's helpful for you not to minimize the experiences of adolescence. Those are your little friends from your little class. Who cares? It's just school, who cares? When the same parents, they come home complaining about their coworkers. So it's the same thing. You spend all day at work and you care what your bosses think about you and your coworkers, and you want to work in a healthy environment. Students want to go to school and they want to be in a healthy environment too. So don't minimize it. Acknowledge their experiences, because it's valid. So healthy peer relationships matter during this phase, so you want to engage in social groups, like I said, where you're valued and accepted, and you also want to engage in a diverse range of groups to broaden your perspective. So not just one type of group, but exposure to different groups so you can see that people think differently, and that's helpful for you. And healthy peer relationships does not exclude the need for conflict resolution skills, because even a healthy peer group, you're going to have conflict. but you need to know how to manage that appropriately. So this is also a phase where you should learn or develop those conflict resolution skills of active listening, compromising, not generalizing, sticking to the facts, communication. This is where you're starting to learn that. Something else, body image during this time, as we just spoke about, is very, very important. Beauty standards. So this is where you're probably taking in a lot of what is displayed in media, social media, television, TV, culture. They have their standard of what is considered beautiful, and if you're exposed to that all the time, that impacts how you see yourself. So it's very important for you to be aware of what you're feeding your brain during this time, and what beauty standards are there. And we can't talk about body image without speaking about one of the most common, unfortunately, disorders that is found in women, and that is eating disorders. And some of the risk factors of eating disorders is low self-esteem, impulsivity, perfectionism, and overachieving, and unfortunately, trauma. Now, some symptoms of eating disorders, there are emotional symptoms, there's physical symptoms that you may see, and something that I just want to highlight is that disordered eating can significantly impact your body's ability to get nutrition. So it can harm your heart, it can harm your major organs, it can harm your bones and your teeth, and can lead to other diseases, and it can be fatal. So if someone is going down this path, it is treatable, but they would need inpatient, it's an emergency, and they would need inpatient services. Some of the treatment for eating disorders would be CBT to help to rewire and deconstruct some of those negative thought patterns, and interpersonal psychotherapy to help to improve their interpersonal relationships. So I have just a resource here if any young women are here today or watching online who you know someone who is unfortunately struggling with this. There's the National Alliance for Eating Disorders that's on the screen. You can go back and snap a picture of that resource for other people. So some protective factors, things that girls need to know at this stage, again, safe and healthy mentors, positive peer supports, healthy media intake, positive physical development, academic achievement and planning and goal setting, good coping skills, and emotional regulation and problem solving. Social and emotional competence needs to continue to develop, good decision-making skills, and then self-control, positive self-esteem, self-efficacy, and things like that.
All right, so at this stage, ages 12 to 18, that's when our children, our young girls, are getting a little bit more independent. Some of them are getting their first jobs. They're babysitting, family members for some money. They may be working at the grocery store or something like that. So this is the time where they really learn how to be more independent with their money and their money habits. So at this time, it's really helpful to create those financial goals, as big or small as they may be at that, early age. And whether you're making a whole lot of money or a little bit of money, it's just always being a steward, right? You don't want to just be splurging every time you get paid off to the, shoe store, And so this is where those healthy habits are being created. So at this stage, it's important to create those financial goals, understanding compounding interest. And the reason why I mention this now is because for many people, they don't really get the hang of compound interest until they're later in their 30s and 40s. So you want to try to really get this ingrained, and it's about this. It's a saving formula, basically. So you want to learn about how to save your money and have your money work for you, right? So it may just be a little bit in the beginning, right? They're only making a few dollars an hour as a babysitter or what have you. But putting money away into a vehicle like even a CD or a small bank account, that's going to give them some interest, and let them see that continue to grow and compound. Because as they get older and they learn about these other vehicles, they'll be able to take more advantage of, and they can see compounding interest in the distance, and the sunshine place of retirement, it's hard to think about at age 12 that you'd be thinking about it, but I will be very honest, and at age 16, I was looking forward to retirement. So that's why I'm so confident that this is such a good time to really educate your kids about money and how it can grow and how it can continue to grow when you're not doing the work, right? So that's a very important thing. Also being intentional with your money. So you want to make sure that you're doing the things you want to do with your money. You're not allowing other people to make decisions about what you do with your money. You're not, just spending, like I said, without control. Talking about money at this age is really important. What we find as you grow up, if you're not talking about money and have a healthy relationship with money and having healthy conversations around money, those conversations become more difficult. So they're going for their first real job, and now they need to negotiate their salary. They don't understand their value yet. They're young, right? So, but if they understand how money works, they know how much they need, they know what it takes to live, they start to experience, okay, I have to make these transactions, it becomes important for them to have these conversations. So it's this stage where they build that muscle, okay? It's this stage where they build the confidence to do the work that they have to do, to have these conversations and get what they deserve. So between 12 and 18, they need to ask questions, they need to negotiate. So this is where you're, as parents and the adults in the room, you work on this stuff with your kids, We don't want to just leave them to the wolves. This is our part. This is our part in helping and shaping and molding our girls and into young women to be able to do these things, to be able to negotiate on their own behalf, to be advocates for themselves. So asking questions, learning from their mistakes, this is the easy time, right? Because they still have their parents to fall back on or their caregivers. So, if they make a little mistake with their money this week, it's having those healthy conversations and letting them know, all right, maybe you didn't really need to spend all that money on that jacket. Maybe we could have gone, with something a little less, less expensive or whatever the case may be. But just basically allowing them to make those mistakes, but teaching them how, those mistakes can be done better next time. And surrounding yourself, because like Jennifer mentioned, you have to surround yourself with people who are aligned with you, how you want to show up in the world. So you don't want to be hanging out with the girl or the guy who's just always spending all their money all the time, or they don't have a care, so they may have a little bit of a different financial situation. So you'll want to align yourself with people who have the same or similar goals to you. And this is where it starts, because now you're getting ready to go into college. You're going to be off on your own in many cases, and you have to learn how to do these things on your own. When I said you don't want to have people spending your money for you, you don't want to go out with someone who doesn't have their own, but feel very comfortable asking you for yours. So you have to be able to say no. You have to know how to say no. So all of these things are very important, but also money isn't everything. And so this is a time where you have to learn how to do things for free, right? So go to the museum and check out the library and do things that make you happy that don't cost money, because there may be a time in your life where you don't have it or enough of it to do the things you love or want to do. So you have to find things that you love or want to do that don't cost a whole lot. And so this is the time where you sort of, again, flex that muscle. You start to build that muscle a bit and find things out about yourself that can help you towards your financial goals in the future. Amen.
All right, so we're going to get into an example of an adolescent between the age of 12 to 18 years old who is also spiritually strong. And this is one of my favorite examples of a youth in the Bible as well. It's the little maid. She was the servant of Naaman's wife. And a little background about her. The little maid was a young Israelite girl who was captured and taken to serve in the household of Naaman, who was a Syrian army commander. And despite being a captive, she demonstrated compassion and faith by suggesting that Naaman seek healing from the prophet Elisha in Israel. Her simple act of kindness and faith played a significant role in Naaman's eventual healing from leprosy. I'm just going to read a little bit about her from the word as well. We're looking at 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 to 4. And it says, "Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel." So we learn a couple of things from the little maid. And before we get into what we learned from her, I'm going to take a look at her health score. So for her physical and her mental health, gave her similar score to that of Josiah because she is still young, and we believe she's about the age of 12, so still developing in both of those areas. Financially, she was a slave, so gave her a lower score in that area, but spiritually gave her a very strong score because of what she did for Naaman and his bout with leprosy. So these are a few things that we learn from her. We learn compassion. Despite being taken captive into the land of Syria, far away from her homeland, she showed compassion towards her captor. And her willingness to help him just shows her position of spiritual strength and compassion towards others. She also had courage. For her as a slave to speak up to her master to say, this is what you can do to be healed, she risked potential backlash and punishment for speaking out. But her courage and sharing her belief that Elisha could help him ultimately led to Naaman's healing. She had humility. So despite her young age and lowly status as a captive, her humility shone through in her suggestion to Naaman's wife. She didn't seek recognition or reward for her advice, but simply just wanted to help. And this is so apparent because we don't even have a name for this young woman. We just know her as the little maid. And lastly, influence. The little maid story illustrates the influence that even seemingly insignificant individuals can have. Her words of faith and compassion had a profound impact on Naaman's life and led to his healing. So can I see a show of hands for all the parents that we have in the room right now? If you are a parent. Yes, okay, so beautiful. So I have been an AY leader and in AY ministry for over 8 years now. And one of the things that I can definitely say, we don't know much about her background. We don't know who her parents were. We don't know if she grew up with her parents or who her guardians were. But one thing that I can absolutely tell by this example of the little maid is that she had a strong spiritual upbringing. So whoever raised her instilled courage in her, instilled compassion in her, instilled humility, and taught her the importance of influence, maybe not even by saying it, but just by the way that they live their lives. And so I just want to implore all of my parents to continue doing what you're doing and having impact and influence on the lives of your children, because she was separated from her home. There was no one there to say, oh, maybe you should tell your master, about potential healing for himself. And so her courage and ability to do that just tells you of the background and the upbringing of this little girl. And so just encouraging our parents as well to continue raising your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And we've learned from this little maid, she teaches us the power of compassion, faith, courage, humility, and influence, showing that even the smallest acts of kindness and faith can make a big difference in the lives of others. So I'll pass it back over to Dr. Lubin.
Okay, we will be moving on to our women ages 19 to 29. So this is a pretty, what I consider as like my bread and butter, right? This is an age group where a woman first will likely have her first interaction with a gynecologist. And for a number of different reasons. This is the first time that they may experience some potential changes in their vagina that has, whether it's with things like smell, discharge, how to navigate when they're exercising, how things change or may feel. So that's one. So we have to have a conversation about just personal hygiene. And of course, we would have had that in that 12 to 18 range. But again, a lot of women then at this point come to seek a gynecological advice or exam is during this age group. So that's one. Two, outside of that, this is when women start to have the conversation about their reproductive health. They are thinking about pregnancy or not pregnancy. So how to either get pregnant or how to prevent pregnancy. So oftentimes they're coming to see a gynecologist in order to have that kind of conversation. Third, a woman is coming in to see someone like me because this is the time when we start doing things such as screenings for whether it's for sexually transmitted diseases, whether it's for something very important like cervical cancer screening. So what we know as the pap smear. So oftentimes women will come and say, it's time for my pap smear, but if you're 19, you're actually not ready yet. The first pap smear happens at age 21. At 21 is the first time that we, as gynecologists, say that a woman should come in order to have her first screening, because although 90% of cervical cancer is related to a virus called HPV, there can be 10% that can actually be sporadic. And so this is the reason why, even in women who may come to me and they may be virginal, that we may still suggest that they still come in for an exam. Lastly, this is the time when women tend to experience things like or need to see a gynecologist, again, because of difficulties with their menstrual cycle, and this may be the first time that they hear of something such as a fibroid or ovarian cysts. These are oftentimes benign conditions, but that can lead to things such as very painful menses, that can lead to things such as very irregular menses. This is also an opportunity, again, for me to have a conversation with women regarding their health status. Again, I can't stress this enough, how we're eating, the exercise, and again, body imaging. So how do women feel about who they are as women, really understanding their bodies, really feeling a positive sense of self is strongly encouraged in that relationship with their medical provider, making sure that they have not just a gynecologist, but that they've transitioned from their pediatrician to a primary care physician. So that way their heart health, their bone health, their gastrointestinal health, all of these things are working in concert to keep them healthy, and this is the opportunity for us to have those conversations. And I think lastly, I think we already talked about this, but no, I didn't. This is definitely the phase where we're talking about women having healthy pregnancies. The best time of a woman's life to have a baby is typically in their 20s. And so, you know, in this day and age, oftentimes women are career-driven and having, you know, they want to become their best selves in terms of financial stability. And of course, we want us to find our right partners and our future soulmates and the people that we're going to live the rest of our lives with. But at the same time, we also need to be thinking about how to have our bodies be in its best status for when we are ready to now start to have a family. And so this is, again, a good opportunity for them to talk to someone like me in order to think about whether or not they even want children, and if they are going to have children, to fix or start to think about how we can, if they are having problems with their menses, how to resolve some of those issues, and what normal prenatal care may look like just when you do get pregnant, how to advocate for yourself, how to have a healthy pregnancy, a safe delivery. This may be the first time actually in that process that they start to experience things such as anxiety, things such as postpartum depression, and those conversations also have to be had. So 18 to 29, I'm thinking everything reproductive, and like I said, whether it's because we're trying to prevent pregnancy or get pregnant and all the things that surround it. And I'll leave it there because we'll move on to the next stage.
Okay. So I've been quiet, y'all, because I'm not anti-children. I have 2 kids, but I don't work with kids at all. So I focus on adults, so I left the expertise to Jennifer because that's what she does and who she's focused in on amongst other adults as well. But my focus is with adults and couples. So to begin, this is the stage as far as psychosocial wellness where women, young women, are either, they could be going away to college, they could be attending college and still living at home, or they've moved out of their home. But because of our economy right now, you may, as an older person, an older adult, have adult children in your home, and that's because of savings amongst other things. But essentially, they are your adult children. And so they can't be treated or spoken to the same exact way you would normally talk to them because even though they're your child, they're still an adult. So it's important to have that discernment, to be mindful about your language. As far as attachment styles in adult relationships, I'm not gonna stay here too long because Jennifer spoke to the attachments, the secure, the avoidant, the ambivalent, and the disorganized. As far as these 4, anyone wanna guess which one we wanna be? Secure, that's right. So we want to be secure because you are able to go ahead and get more comfortable with things like intimacy, autonomy, vulnerability connects with intimacy. You're able to communicate openly, show empathy, and respond sensitively to your partner's needs, fostering a healthy and supportive relationship dynamic. Now, even though we're speaking, or I'm speaking to relationships, this also applies to friendships. So even if a person is not in a romantic relationship or not married, or a committed relationship rather, you're still needing to understand how to navigate the relationships and the friendships around you. Key way, y'all, to go ahead, or a key skill, I would say, to having perfectly imperfect, healthy, and fulfilling platonic and romantic relationships is attunement. So attunement refers to the ability to understand and respond to the emotional needs of your partner or friend, as we said before. So you want to be able to be involved emotionally, available, empathetic, and responsive to the other person's cues. I think based on my clinical experience with the people that I have worked with, I've discovered that we ultimately are who we are at our core for 3 factors. And they are your genetics, your upbringing, and your life experiences. Those are key things that definitely impact and influence who you are today. And so it's important to take a look in the mirror and say, how was I raised? You know, or what's in my genetic pool? Because just because something is in your genetic pool doesn't mean you have to have it. You know, you can navigate to understand more information by educating yourself. Google is your friend. YouTube is known as YouTube University for a reason. There's so much resources, and you want to be mindful about discerning what's good and what's not, but at the same time, be informed about how to advance your knowledge about a particular area of something that could be occurring in your relationships and or friendships that's healthy or non-healthy. Okay, so the next thing, it says maturing emotionally. And this is where I believe we need to stop making excuses. This is the age where, before this age, as Jennifer had described, they're trying to identify themselves. They're trying to find themselves. Now, as a 19 to 29-year-old, it's time to take accountability. It's time to really be real and authentic with yourself and say, okay, mom and dad did this, and they said that, and auntie and uncle did that, and my cousin always did this, and I just responded this way. But now mom and dad are doing their own thing, or you moved out, or you're away in college, or you're commuting back and forth, but essentially you have to choose to get up and go to work and go to school and pay those bills. Because if not, everything's gonna get cut off. No more phone, no more lights, whatever else, no power. You will have to face the consequences now of your actions. So that's why it's important to be mindful about how can I mature emotionally during this stage. So first of all, what does it mean to be emotionally mature? So emotionally mature people are able to express, demonstrate a balanced understanding and management of their own emotions. They're able to empathize with others, navigate challenging situations with resilience, and maintain healthy relationships based on mutual respect and communication. Benefits of being emotionally mature. So you guys can read this. I'm not gonna read it all. I'll just read the top ones and break it down a little bit. But the first one I would say is you can identify your strengths and weaknesses. When you are beginning to grow emotionally and becoming more mature in that department in your life, you're able to see the things that you're working well with and where you blossom, where you bloom, and then those other areas where you struggle, so you know how to navigate and do it differently. You know what your preferences are and how to set boundaries when needed. Boundaries is like this word, it's either cliche or it's taboo. People don't really want to talk about it. And I believe, and I have found, especially amongst us as Christians, we can sometimes sort of bend the rules where we don't have our boundaries aligned or in place as it should be. And I want you to keep in mind a particular verse, just in case you're trying to travel on that other road, where the Bible tells us, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But even before that, it says, what is the greatest commandment? To love God, right? And then it says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So in order to love my neighbor, I have to love myself first. I have to know how to treat myself so other people can see me treating me well and treat me well too. Okay, so strengthen your relationships is another one. Having insight on how to recognize and nurture those healthy relationships, self-motivated, and know your purpose. If you are emotionally mature, you will be able to discover your passion. It might take a lot of trial and error, but you will get there because you're ready, you're open, and you're willing. Don't ignore your feelings, rather explore them. That's another part of becoming emotionally mature. Gain awareness of your emotions. Keep track of your feelings. And this can be done, y'all, by doing something like journaling. Something I highly recommend for a lot of my clients is journaling, and we know journaling is something you write down in a notebook. But for some people, you may find that to be tedious. So I have also said, why not go ahead and do video journaling? So that might be setting up your phone, putting the video on, and just talking. Nobody has to see it. You can delete it afterwards, but allow yourself to just be and speak to whatever it is that's heavy on your heart, heavy on your mind. You can also do that in an audio form as well. And as I said, you could delete it if you want. But the point is to keep track of it and to let it out and to release it and not hold it in. Why don't you want to hold it in? Because our brains and our hearts can only carry but so much. And we are not God. We are not perfect. So we have to pace ourselves. How to become emotionally mature. Make time for yourself. I mentioned the journal already. Practice stillness in prayer and mindfulness. And you may or may not have heard of the word mindfulness. It's like another trending hashtag thing, right? But mindfulness is not necessarily something where it's like yoga. And I know as Christians, and Adventists, we tend to stay away or shy away from certain things where we don't want to delve into the spiritual things that are not of God. And we are accurate and right to do so because we know that we are in a spiritual warfare, literally, and it's not something we're making up and it's all in our heads. But being mindful is about pacing yourself. So mindfulness is if you're eating, you're taking your time to eat. You're slowing down. You're noticing what you're eating. Oh, I have a whole lot more rice than I do vegetables, and that's not what the doctor told me. Whatever else you're saying to yourself, just being mindful and slowing down. So when you think about mindfulness, I want you to consider 5 senses, what we all learn in kindergarten. Seeing, what am I keeping around me? What's here? Being present. Hearing, what are you listening to? What are you feeding, as Jennifer spoke to before, what are you feeding your mind? What are you tasting, eating, as Dr. Sophia spoke to before, your touch and taste. Ways that you can sabotage being emotionally mature, isolating yourself. Someone spoke to that before as well. Connect instead with a community. That's your church, that's a social group. That's get comfortable with rejection. And now social groups don't have to go to your local community center. There are so many, again, y'all, no excuses. There's something called, if you've never heard of it before, meetup.com, where you are able to connect with other people based on your interests. I would highly recommend, if you're looking to expand your horizons, be more open, be more vulnerable, learn something new. All it does, you sign up for free, and you're able to go ahead and put down your interests, whether it's bicycling, poetry, writing, whatever it is. They have all types of groups, and most of them are for free. And you meet on a regular basis with these people, and you're open, and you're just getting to know yourself as you connect with others. Also, another site I would recommend is eventbrite.com. That's something a lot of entrepreneurs and companies, they'll sponsor and put things on there. But you can also identify events that, whether it's business, professional, or personal, that you can delve into and grow. Our point is to grow. We're not in heaven, and our goal is to continue to strive and keep our eyes on the prize, right? In order to do that, we have to keep moving. So community helps with that. Not believing in anything. I believe it's Martin Luther King who says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So we want to be mindful. You have a lot of people walking around and say, I believe in a higher power. You know, they won't say God, they won't say Christ, but they'll say a higher power higher than me. And you have things like Alcoholics Anonymous and other groups who deal with addiction behaviors who go ahead and they rely on a higher power. Literally, they say poems and recite other things to affirm themselves in knowing I can't do this by myself. I can't do this by myself. This is a common person, someone who may not be a Christian, and they're saying, I have to acknowledge that I can only do but so much. So keep in mind, having your faith will help you get through some difficult times. Faith in God and surrendering that you are not all-powerful builds resilience. Next one is lack of accountability. I sort of touched on that, but I would want to emphasize the second one, self-control, is essential to decreasing impulsive behaviors. I don't need to say anything more than that. I think you get it. But I also want to emphasize embracing constructive criticism. Not everybody is a hater. Not everybody is after you. Not everybody is jealous and envious of you. Some people actually have your best interests at heart. And during that time, especially that 19 to 29 years old, trying to find yourself, you're not really trying to hear other people. And unfortunately, some of us have to learn the hard way, right? And I'm sure many of you who are parents or grandparents, you have been a witness to see your children and grandchildren go through some things that you don't necessarily want for them, but they have to learn it on their own. But the key is to appreciate and take in constructive criticism. Create space and time for self-care. Connect with God first and yourself as an immediate second. And I referenced the verse that I told you about before. I think that's what ties in. Avoid social distraction when necessary. Treat yourself the way you want others to treat you. And lastly, emotional maturity matters. Becoming self-aware and open to insight is a starting point for self-improvement. You will experience better relationships and at the same time formulate better strategies for improvement. I hope that was helpful for you all.
Amen. So we don't want to ignore, or going back to what Dr. Sophia mentioned about, this is the stage where people tend to expand their families. So we do want to bring out perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. We also call them PMADs. Most people are familiar with just postpartum depression. That's not the only one. There's more than that. So we're going to just dive a little bit into that. So when we speak about perinatal, we're speaking about the time frame from conception to the first year postpartum. And as you can see on the screen, there are several forms of PMADs, and you'll see in the corner PSI, Postpartum Support International, does great work, research for this. There are support groups and therapists there that can be of assistance. So just some stats with PMADs: 1 in 5 women experience a maternal mental health disorder, but less than 15% receive treatment because there's still education that needs to be done. And of course, there are things that impact social determinants of health. So maybe up to 50% of people living in poverty are more likely to have maternal mental health disorders. And it's double for Black moms due to various reasons, but that's a whole nother program. But just know that there is a lot of talk in the healthcare field about racism and inadequate care for Black moms. I'm just going to put that there. Okay, so postpartum or PMADs are not baby blues. It's not the same thing. So baby blues affects the majority of new mothers. It's due to hormone fluctuation at the time of their birth. It usually lasts between 2 days to 2 weeks, usually peaks around the 3rd and 3 to 5 days. And if it persists longer than that, it is not baby blues. That's not what it is. So please, let's stop sharing that. So I have some examples on the screen of the PMADs, and again, these are connected to your birth, your delivery, and becoming a new mom. So we have the postpartum depression, we have postpartum anxiety, postpartum obsessive compulsive disorder, postpartum post-traumatic stress disorder, so that's from if you had birth trauma, then that's connected to that. And then postpartum psychosis, which would be delusions, strange beliefs, hallucinations, and such. And this is the most dangerous one, and I want to just spend some time on that really quickly because this can be a psychiatric emergency. So, well, anytime there's psychosis, active psychosis is a psychiatric emergency. So the most significant risk factor for postpartum psychosis is personal or family history of bipolar disorder. So if you have a history of bipolar disorder, you are more at risk. And if you abruptly end your treatment while you're pregnant, that puts you further at risk. And anytime there's elevated delusional thinking or irrational judgment, that is considered dangerous, and you should seek treatment immediately from a licensed professional. It is temporary and treatable, and majority of women who have postpartum psychosis do not harm themselves or anyone else, despite what the media shows. Mm-hmm. Most of them do not, but you need to get treatment. It is a medical emergency. So here are just some risk factors of it, and out of all of these, I want to pinpoint that when you become a new mom, what is one of the things that you can count off your list that you're not going to get a lot of? Sleep, right? So, but anybody who has not had significant amount of sleep for a long duration is at risk for psychosis, okay? So if you add months and months and months and other stresses on top of that, then that can happen. So we don't want to shame moms who may be experiencing any of this. It's temporary and it's treatable, and getting help is important. Remember, less than 15% get help, so we want to look out for these things. So risk of untreated PMAD. So if you don't get treatment for it and you just try to power through, we see problems in your relationships, potential domestic violence. We see poor adherence to medical care, potential child abuse and neglect, developmental delays for the child, substance use and abuse, unfortunately, infanticide, suicide, or homicide. Again, those numbers are lower, but it can happen. There are risks. And unemployment. So what is helpful during this time, if you are planning on having a child or you just had, if that's in the future, it's good to have a postpartum plan. And in that plan, you would include supports and resources, a sleep and rest plan. When are we doing this? Who's sleeping when? Sleep has to be in there. What are your warning signs? Some coping strategies, self-care, household and practical concerns. How are we going to get the laundry done? Who's going to do the groceries? Have this stuff planned out. A visitor's policy. People keep coming by. That adds stress. Everyone who comes by is not really helpful. So you probably want to have that in there. Healthcare, professional resources, and emergency resources. Some therapeutic treatment for this. We have interpersonal therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, group therapy, and families and couples therapy. And this is just a flyer of Postpartum Support International. There is a national maternal mental health hotline. May is Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month as well. So it's the numbers on the screen. It's 1-800-944-4773. It's supposed to be 1-800. The last four is supposed to say it's spell mama, basically. But that's a resource there for anyone that you know that may be going through that, because again, it's very serious, and I always want to leave the 988 crisis resource line. And I'm going to take us back really quick. You're going to see the slides flashing. Going to make you a little bit dizzy. Act like you don't see this. We're getting back to finance. There we go.
All right. Wow, that was definitely a lot, guys. Girls, ladies. Yeah, you guys really put some stuff on the table here. So, with all of that being said, of course, there's a lot going on between 19 and 29, financially as well, and things that, if you don't have your finances in order and you have no plan to get them in order, the mental effect that can have on someone, right? Not being prepared, not feeling prepared, it can really weigh on someone. So this is why talking about money very early is important with our kids, because by the time they get to this point where they're independent or supposed to be independent, it can be a lot for them when they feel that they can't do it, right? So that's why we have to have those conversations. But also when they're getting their first jobs, when they're becoming independent, learning how to build on those savings habits, right? Creating that emergency fund. When we say emergency fund, well, what is that? What exactly is that supposed to do? Saving 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and that's just a basic concept. Again, you want to start doing that at this stage, because you're going to keep growing that emergency fund. You don't just make one emergency fund, put $3,000 away, and now you're done, okay? Because the expenses grow as you grow, right? Your family grows, you have other expenses. Now you have to worry about childcare. You have to worry about all these other things. So you need to make sure that you have enough for wherever you are in that stage of your life. So this is where you start to build that habit. Always be saving. And then next thing is protecting your future income and your future assets. So this is, again, you're in the foundation stage. So we don't know what you're going to do yet, but the goal is always to be amazing, right? So you want to make sure you're prepared for that. So when you become amazing, you want to be able to protect yourself, that if something happened to you, became ill, that you can still provide for your family. That if, unfortunately, you or your spouse pass away, that you don't have to lose your home, right? So you start doing that at this stage. You don't wait till 40 and 50 years old to start planning for that, because it becomes way more costly. It's like a drop in the bucket to save in a life insurance plan at 20 years old. No one really talks about that, but that's literally the best time to start thinking about that. So protecting your future income, protecting your assets, and protecting your future family. It's also a great time if you have an employer to start using your employer for their match, okay? If your employer is giving you anything, whether it's 1%, 3%, or 5%, take the free money, guys. Take the free money. And then, in addition to that, you're gonna start purchasing or saving towards your real estate purchases, and you want to start growing your money through stocks, investing. This is the time, right? You're young. You have to, put yourself out there, right? And so this is the way to do it. This is the time to do it. So for those who are not familiar with the markets and things like that, get that education. And if you don't feel confident that you can do it, just speak to someone who is qualified, a qualified, certified financial planner. They are out there. They're at the banks, okay? They are at your employment. They're definitely usually someone who can help you with that. I also help with that. So it's something that, you have to really keep yourself aware of what's out there. Make sure you are having those conversations again about money and talk to people around you. What are they doing, right? Like, well, how are you saving? What bank are you banking with? Where are you finding the best return on your investment? And these conversations should happen. I know it's kind of taboo to talk about money with people, but this is the only way you get this information, right? Like, if you're not the person who's picking up Wall Street Journal every week, you're not getting it. So talk about it. And then steering clear of bad debt. Bad debt is, it's those store cards, right? It's that the money you don't really need because it's for things that you don't need. It's usually for things that you want. So if it's not something that you absolutely need, like a house or your education, right? Those are the things you're going to get debt for and hopefully be able to bring some value once you have them. But if it's not for that, don't even buy it. Don't do it, and stay clear of the bad debt because, again, this is the stage where you create bad habits. They stick with you, okay? And then they prevent you from getting ahead financially in other ways, okay? Because you're now paying off this bad debt, so now you can't save. You don't have the emergency fund yet. You don't have a house fund, and now you have to send your kids to daycare, and you're like, can't do that either. It's too expensive. That's my whole check. So if you're feeling like that, it's time to really buckle down. Because in this stage, the 19 to 29, these are some of the early easy years, I like to call them, because you are possibly still at home, right? You still have a soft landing place, and so it's a really good time to just really build the muscle, save the money, be a steward, and don't forget the tithing, right? This is also important. It's a savings habit that you have to build. And if you're not able to do that at 19, 20, 21 to 29, it just gets more difficult because you have to remember all these other things are going to be pulling at you. These things are going to be happening. You have to commute. You have to have a car. You have children you got to take care of. And so you don't want that to ever be the last thing on the agenda. That should be the top of the budget sheet. So those are the things that you want to be mindful of in that age range.
All right, so we're going to talk about one of our characters who's in early adulthood. So a question for the audience, and you can just say it out. If God came to you in a dream and asked you what you wanted, anything that you wanted, and he would give it to you, what would that thing be? Huh? Teleport. There it is. All right. So we're going to get into our next Bible character, who is Solomon. And he was the king of Israel. So for his profile, he is a male between the ages of 19 and 29. And his location was Jerusalem. So King Solomon was the son of King David and Bathsheba, and he became the third king of Israel after his father's death. During his rule, he achieved several significant accomplishments, including wisdom, building products, wealth and prosperity, and literary contributions. So we're going to take it back to the Word. This time we're in 1 Kings, and we're going to read verses 5 to 15. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask, what shall I give thee?" And Solomon said, "Thou hast showed unto thy servant David my father great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father. And I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people?" And his speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing, which is wisdom. And God said unto him, "Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment, behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. And I have also given thee thou which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days." And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all of his servants. So Solomon was in his prime. Solomon could have asked for anything. I was watching a YouTube video where basically someone comes around with a mic in the streets and asks young adults and adolescents, like, what would you want if you could have anything? And the answers were Ferraris, houses, land, women, all kinds of things. And I was like, oh, wow. But contrasting that to Solomon, who asked in his young adulthood, he asked God for wisdom. And then not only did he get the wisdom, but he also got the riches and the honor on top of that as well. All right, so during his rule, Solomon achieved several significant accomplishments. He got wisdom, which we know he asked God for, and he famously demonstrated this wisdom when two women came to him with one baby, both saying that the baby was theirs. And Solomon's solution to the dilemma was to divide the baby in half and figure out who the mother was. And it was the mother who could not imagine dividing her child in half, cutting her baby in half, who he realized was the actual mother. Then he was also well known for his building projects. So he undertook major construction projects, including the building of the first temple in Jerusalem, which became the center of worship for the Israelites. He had wealth and prosperity, which we know came as a result of him asking for the right thing, for wisdom, and then came the wealth and the prosperity. So his reign was marked by great wealth, great prosperity, and he established trade routes and alliances, which brought significant wealth to Israel. And then he had literary contributions as well. He's traditionally attributed with writing several books of the Bible, including Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs. So despite his many achievements, Solomon's reign also faced challenges, including the strain of maintaining his vast building projects. And you were talking about stewardship, so that made me think of Solomon as well. And also the idolatry introduced by foreign wives in his later years. So we can learn 6 lessons from the life of Solomon. One is discernment. So his ability to discern the truth in complex situations, such as the case of the 2 women that we discussed. Wisdom, he sought wisdom, sought by rulers and commoners alike, and it teaches us the value of seeking wisdom and understanding wisdom in our own lives. We learn the lesson of prioritization. So despite his wisdom, Solomon's later years were marked by a departure from God's commands due to his many foreign wives and their influence. His life teaches us the importance of prioritizing God's command and not letting worldly pursuits distract us from what truly matters. We learn the art of humility. His acknowledgement of his own limitations and need for wisdom from God, especially at the beginning of his reign, teaches us humility. No matter how wise or successful we become, it's important to recognize our dependence on God and that we remain humble. We learn stewardship. Solomon's vast building projects and opulent lifestyle highlight the responsibility of stewardship. While it's not wrong to enjoy the blessings of wealth, his excesses serve as a warning against extravagance and the potential pitfalls of wealth. And lastly, legacy. Solomon's legacy, tarnished unfortunately in his later years, reminds us that our actions have consequences that can affect not only our lives, but also the lives of future generations. It's important to consider the legacy we're leaving behind and to strive to leave a positive impact. So overall, Solomon's life teaches us about the importance of wisdom, discernment, humility, stewardship, as well as the consequences of our actions. Amen.
Okay, we're moving on now to the age group, and this is a pretty wide range, so I'm actually going to break it up into 2. So we're going to talk first from the 30s to about 45, and then from 45 to 64, and see how things change and what are the things we should be considering when we're thinking about wellness and health for women. So from the ages of 30 to 45, this is a time actually where we start to think about we can start to think about things like cancers. This is where it really becomes very important that we understand our family history, that we're having conversations with our families about what happened to grandma, what happened to grandpa, what happened to uncle, whatsoever, and Auntie Anne, because those things may have an impact on our screenings and the things that we need to do in our future. So for example, for a young woman who may be 30, whose mother may have experienced something such as breast cancer, was diagnosed at the age of 41, well, that woman would need to start her screening at least 10 years earlier. So at 31 is when she should actually be going for her first mammogram. That's one. Secondly, cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is a cancer that is actually diagnosed very often in women in their 30s. Because we're exposed to the virus, as I said before, in our early adulthood and late adolescence and early adulthood, and then that slow growing process then develops into the potential for cervical cancer, and that's when we first time seeing it is in our 30s. So it's important that we establish very good health care in the sense of going to our providers on an annual basis, including someone like me, like a gynecologist, in order to make sure that we're going through these screening processes and going through our family history and seeing where we have some risks and seeing where we can be mitigating some of that risk. Also, in your 30s and 40s, this is when you start to experience a lot of potential difficulties with the pelvis. Whether that is, again, the idea of fibroids and leading to things such as anemia, as well as when we start to begin to think about other major healthcare concerns such as high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, etc., and how that's going to impact us later on in our lives. So this is an opportunity for you to get with someone like me and to make sure that we're addressing all of those potential problems, because for some women, coming to their gynecologist, that's their only doctor that they're actually seeing. And so if we are clear about how we're going to think about their healthcare goals, then we're going to be able to mitigate a lot of the issues that arise. I cannot stress this enough, the concept of healthy habits. So I know we went through childhood, adolescence, etc., but if we are not really changing around how we are eating and our exercise routines, then this will be a setup for all of the other things that are happening to us in our 30s and our 40s, because this is the time, as early as 30, we are already starting to experience hormonal changes. The kind of changes that can lead to things like brain fog, mental illness, changes in our bones, changes in our gut health, etc. So if we are not addressing them earlier on in life, this is definitely the time when we start to develop some of those issues and seeing things like pounds that pile on and you don't know why or how to deal with it. This is also the time when we're experiencing, if we weren't able to or not even thinking about pregnancy in our 20s, which is completely normal, but now in our 30s, we're starting to think about things like a pregnancy and how to grow our families, and it's the first time we start to experience infertility issues or reproductive issues. And so, and then moving on from that, again, we've already talked in very extensive ways. I'm so glad to my panelists. But the risk of developing mental health disorders, if they haven't already presented themselves as they typically do in late adolescence and early adulthood in your 20s, they can develop here, because this is a lifetime, this is the time when we are under a lot of stress. We're trying to succeed and move forward in our careers, etc. And so this is a time frame when women typically come in with other life stressors and then now see it impacting them physically. So they're having, they finally landed the job of their dreams, but don't realize that that job comes with such a cost. And so this is the first time that they're experiencing things like difficulties in terms of their vaginal health, difficulties in their relationships, having mood disorders, etc. Finally, we're moving on from in our 30s and 40s to really going in on those hormonal changes that we are experiencing 40 and beyond, and now talking about perimenopause and menopause. So what's funny about perimenopause is that it's the same symptoms we're going to experience in menopause, except that we're still getting a period. So people are confused. Women are oftentimes confused because they've now developed things like joint pain. They have now developed things like weight gain. They have now developed things like mood disorders or anxiety. They have now developed things like, again, infertility. And oftentimes what happens is that they have gone to 5 different doctors before someone finally says, I think you're in perimenopause. And so if we don't recognize the symptoms of perimenopause, we may never get to that answer, because your lab work will look completely normal. It will look like you're just a normal 43-year-old, except that you're experiencing hot flashes and insomnia and night sweats and lack of motivation and weight gain for looking at food. You didn't even eat it yet. And so if we're not having these kinds of conversations around the hormone health and how we're eating and exercising, et cetera, then we're not going to be prepared for when that time happens. So again, going from perimenopause into menopause being the actual full 12 months of no period. And when that happens, it's never to come back. So if you are 56 and you came back and you got your period again, this is not, oh, I'm young again. No. Okay. this is a problem, and maybe you have not seen a gynecologist in 5 or 10 years because you're done with your childbearing, or you're done, you figured, oh, I don't even have a partner anymore. Your partner may have passed, you may be divorced, whatever, and you're like, I don't need to see a gynecologist anymore. No, we still need to see our gynecologist on a regular basis in order to remain healthy. It's exactly like going to your primary care doctor, making sure that you don't have high blood pressure or how to manage it, diabetes and how to manage it. And that is the same with our reproductive organs. This is, again, the time when we have a rebound of cancers, whether that's uterine cancer or ovarian cancer. And unfortunately, for things like ovarian cancer, we don't have a good screening tool. At least when we think about uterine cancer, our bodies give us a little signal, and at that 56-year-old who may have that bleeding, that could be that first indication that she is developing some form of a cancer. And if we listen to ourselves, truly, again, embracing our bodies and embracing ourselves, then we are paying attention to what's happening on the inside and now can bring that to the forefront to our providers. So, this is a time for us to think about what are the supplements that we need? What are the things that we need to be doing in order to be our healthiest selves? Because the same amount of time that we spent in our reproductive years is the same amount of time we're going to spend in our postmenopausal years, if not even more time, because for some women who go through menopause at age 40, we're going to go live, hopefully I want to, live another 50 years without my period, right? So that should be a time that I learn how to not just go through all the symptoms and thinking about the worst parts of menopause, but rather the freedom that it gives me. And if I'm thinking about it that way, then we're going to live in a more vital way and the possibility of living to 90 with all of our faculties. So, in closing, 30s to 40s, infertility, you start to think about certain cancers, and we start to think about our hormone health. Definitely in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, again, cancers, making sure that we're preventing and having the appropriate screening. And again, understanding how our hormones change in this time frame, and actually having open and honest conversations around our hormone health. And lastly, living vitally. We want to be doing all of the things that we can do for our mental health, but more so, very specifically, our cognitive health. That we are avoiding things and doing all of the things that can help us get through without dementia, without developing things that are going to make us feel like we have somehow lost it. How many of us want to reach 90 and can still do all of our things by ourselves? Right? Can still read the paper and can still recognize our children and grandchildren. That is the goal, right? And we have to start building on that goal from when we are in our 30s, even younger, of course, with healthy habits, but 30s, 40s, and 50s. So I will leave it there, and I will pass the mic.
Okay, y'all, it's my turn again. So for psychosocial wellness, for our middle adulthood, due to time, we're just gonna try to be as efficient as possible with what we have up here. So bear with me, bear with us. First slide I have up here is, when is it time for couples therapy? Now, couples therapy isn't necessarily something that you have to do after 30, after 40. I just put that there because that's been my experience. The couples that I'm getting are the ones who are a little bit more well-versed, a little bit more seasoned, or they're trying to maintain what they do have, which is a solid foundation, a solid relationship. But you can also have couples therapy for, as you can see, premarital counseling, and that's to clarify things, to clarify, gain insight, It's to be proactive about your marriage before you even get there. You can also have it for maintenance, as I said before. So there are many happy couples that are still coming to therapy, and they're still going on couples retreats, and they're still going to workshops because they want to maintain what they have. So whenever you need to go and get support or go and get resources, it's not because you have a problem, something's wrong. It's just to make sure that you stay on the right track, right? Last one is repair. So you could see the broken heart. That can be for infidelity, unfortunately. That can be for betrayal of some other kind. One client that I had, or a couple, the husband went and blew their savings because he realized he had an addiction, a gambling addiction. So that's going to take repair because he betrayed his wife's trust. So it doesn't always have to be in the category of something like, oh, it's an affair. I was going to break these down, but you can take a screenshot and look them up later. But the four most common types of couples therapy would be the Gottman method, emotionally focused therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and solutions-focused couples therapy. And the reason why I put that up there is that if in the event you are looking for a couples therapist or even a family therapist, ask them, oh, what's your model? And then after that, you can go do the research, find out, is this something that would be a good fit for me and my family, or me and my partner and or spouse? How to be attuned to your partner. So remember, we talked about that before. This is the time now, as you're older, you want to stay in your marriage for more than just to say that you're married. You want companionship, right? And you want it to be done right, and you want to have peace. You want to have peace of mind. There's no more time for games. You're not 21, you're now 40-something, 30-something. It's time to do the right thing by this person, and also for them to do the right thing by you. So 4 tips to get attuned. Number 1, get attuned to Christ individually and as a couple. So that can be devotions on your own, but also pray with your spouse. Pray with your partner. You don't have to be married to pray with the person that you're with. You can be on the phone and have prayer and things along those lines. You can send each other encouraging words, but really finding that higher power, which we know as God and Christ, to be in the center of your relationship. Next one, number 2, is adjust to how you communicate. Oh, I've always been this way. I always talk this way. It doesn't matter. You should be used to me. That's not okay. That's not an excuse. That's terrible for you to think that this person should just take it or just receive it. I like to say to my clients, speak so your partner can receive. So speak it to receive it. Whatever it is that you're saying, be mindful about who you got, not who you want to have. Who are you speaking to? And that's how you speak, so they can receive whatever it is that you're speaking to, or whatever it is that's concerning to you. Next one, number 3, is to show empathy. So you may not be able to completely get it, but you can connect with this person in trying to understand. I like to say that you go ahead and you take classes and major in your partner as almost like they're a major in college, like you're studying them. Let them be the teacher and you are the student to understand it. So I may not agree with you, but how can I respect you? How can I still care for you? And that's all about communication and asking questions, not just assuming. And number 4 is know their love language and speak it. How many of you have heard of love languages before? I think most of us have, right? 5 love languages. So it is giving gifts, it is quality time, it is words of affirmation, it is physical touch, and acts of service. My number 1, and I always forget it. So basically, you want to be able to be mindful about the language that you are speaking and how you're receiving the language from your partner. So this is, I heard you say such and such. Was that what you said? And they may say, no, that's not it at all. Okay, say it again. Can you say it in a different way? I don't really get it. Can I pray about it? Let me think about it. Let's table this for another day. Do not allow yourself to get caught up in the thing or focusing in on your partner being the thing. Fight fair. Fight the issue, not the person. Remember who you're with. Next one is A Parent's Guide to Healthy Relationships When Your Children Leave the Family Home. So they finally have left. You finally got them out. Now, you're noticing a whirlwind of emotions. You thought, oh, I'm going to be so happy, so excited. And then you find yourself sad. I remember when I first went away to college for undergrad, my mom started crying in church out of nowhere, just crying and really emotional. And someone came up to her, they're like, I've never seen you cry. You're such a tough person. What happened? She said, I really miss my daughter. And she's like, I didn't even realize how much I miss her. And I'm like, oh, brother. You know, I'm 18. I'm just like, get over it. I'll see you soon. We talk every day. I'll see you soon enough. So graduating and moving out, I think these were really key things that I wanted to reinforce to people to trust not only what it is that you're putting in them and what you have within yourself, but trust God. Give it back to him. So take pride and gratitude for their accomplishments and their newfound independence. They're finally out. Why? A part of that is not just them and the good job and their value system. You helped get them there. So take pride in that. Find value in that. Trust the values, brace the emotions, focus on communication and connection. 3 tips on moving forward. Remind yourself that this is an end of a phase, not the end of their lives. You can talk to them. You can see them. You can have meaningful connections still, even if they're not in your home. Focus on cultivating current and new meaningful relationships. Embrace new opportunities and hobbies. Don't forget about your romantic relationship. And if this is the person that helped you get these kids, they were there first, right? So we have to go ahead and reignite passion and intimacy, prioritize quality time, communicate, and navigate new life transitions together. You're going to go through difficult times. You don't have to do it alone. I love this picture for this because I just feel like the person looks exhausted and dirty and whatever else. But self-care, another hashtag trending word, but it's a very real thing. And I know Dr. Sophia mentioned it before, but we can't stress this enough. And I won't go into all of it for time, but just be intentional about taking care of yourself. Sleep, meals, fitness, and connection with other people, okay? Another portion that I did have is God's love, self-love, and divorce. Unfortunately, for some of us, that is our plight. How do we navigate through that? So divorce is a loss, so grieve in your truth and your faith. You can reference Psalms 34, verse 18. I will let you all read these verses on your own due to time. You are not alone in this journey. Connect with community and tap into your faith. Divorce can feel like the ultimate rejection. Focus on where you are accepted. And specifically in that last verse, God talks about, I'm not rejecting you, I accept you, and I love you. So if this is something where you're feeling like, I'm done, my life is over, it's not over until he says it's over. And as long as you are breathing, you are in your right frame of mind, you have, you're able to go ahead and to function independently, it's not too late for you. So reasons for divorce and stats, I'm not going to go into all that, but really want to press home the issue that a part of the research has shown that women are the ones in later years getting divorced, meaning, not getting a divorce, but initiating the divorce. Why? Because we are no longer married for financial need, because you have to be the one to support me and to pay this for me and to take on your name and to have children. There are many people who are having children, on their own. They're adopting because he hasn't come along, it is what it is, or they're fostering, or whatever it is, the option is they are taking that because they're taking the reins into their own hands, and God is telling them, keep moving. He's not here, keep going. So be mindful about the fact that it's about companionship. And primary reasons for divorce there are so many, but be mindful about seeking counsel, and if in the event that you are being abused or the safety of your children is at risk, that is an indication you gotta go, okay? God hates divorce, but he also does not expect you to be in a life sentence until death. Sometimes that is literally, if we are not mindful. That's not the type of God that I serve. I think we serve, we can all say that. So we wanna be mindful about that. Next is moving forward. Grace and space for yourself to grieve and reach out for support and counseling. Divorce is a loss. So it's just like you have to go through all the motions as if that person physically died and you put them in a casket and you buried them. You have to go through the emotions and allow yourself to be there. Sometimes people say, well, I'm afraid of being emotional. I don't want to sit there and be caught up in my feelings. I recommend get a timer. Put it on your watch, put it on your phone, wherever. You got 5 minutes, Jen, to be mad. After the 5 minutes, it's time to do some self-care. It's time to do something good for yourself because you did a lot by sitting in that thing. Do not be afraid to feel. You will not get swelled up in it. Take your time, pace yourself. Find joy bringers. So we know about stress factors. How about you find some joy bringers as well? Old and new to redefine your new normal, and spend more time building up faith again, because divorce can do that. Separation can do that. A breakup can do that. It can shake your faith. Take small steps to rebuild your life. And lastly, what is next? You get to control the narrative now. It's just you and God, if you have that faith and that connection with him. So what does he want for you? Can you hear him clearly and more loudly? Lesson learned is that you can do hard things. It's a very hard thing to have to go through, whether you're the one who initiated it or you were the one given the papers or you were the one who was ghosted. It's hard. So if you can get through it, and you're not the first person to go through it, you won't be the last. Let that be reassurance to you that you can move forward. New relationships, freedom, and reliance on your God and your faith. And I'll pass it over to Sani.
Okay. So, awesome. So I'm just going to condense or consolidate the last two groups as well. So if you are between the ages of 35 and 64 or 65 or even older, whether or not everything has aligned perfectly financially, you did all the right things from age 7 until now, it's never too late to start saving, okay? So I'll say that, building your good financial habits whenever you have the ability, to save money, put things away, and plan and prepare. Educate yourself and those around you. That's what you're going to be doing if whether or not things lined up. You're going to be doing that at this stage. And if you're interested in creating generational wealth, today would be the day to start, okay? Get a life insurance policy, work on your estate planning, make sure that the things that you've accumulated up until this point and the things you will accumulate going forward, go to the right people at the right time. That's what estate planning is all about. And so that's something you want to make sure you take care of in those stages. You also want to be mindful of your accounts. So now you have money, you have these amazing 401ks and investment retirement accounts. Take a look at them. Don't just let someone tell you there's a million fees behind this account and never think about moving your money, okay? Don't just assume the market's going to go back up or, you just fix it and forget it. Look at your accounts. Make sure, just like with your medical professionals, you're going every year to get your checkups. Do that with your finances as well. Don't just leave it and forget it. Be sure you're going back and looking at what's going on in those accounts and you have a plan for that money, that it goes where you want it to go if something were to happen to you. In addition to that, teach the next generation. At this point, you may have your children, your grandchildren. You want to make sure they're getting that education as well, so you're having those conversations with them. And then lastly, I want to make sure, again, with the estate planning, the beneficiaries on your account, you want to make sure those are on there. And I'm talking as basic as your bank account. Make sure you go in. It's so funny because even me as the financial planner, I had an account that did not have a beneficiary on it. And I only went to check because I had been doing workshops here at the church. And I talk about it all the time. But I said, you know what, there's this one account that I've had since I was 12 or whatever, 14 when I got my job at Citibank. And I had my little brother on that account when I was going to work. And he was still the beneficiary on that account when I came here the first time. So it's just, it's something that's so simple, but, you know, you have to check these things. And not that he shouldn't, you know, be on the account, but I have a husband and children, so, you know, it maybe should go there first. But, you know, it's just a thought that, you know, even for me, it could slip your mind. So just keep those things in mind. Be mindful of your accounts. Be mindful of the things that you have, the things you have and where you want them to go, okay? So those are the things that I just want you to keep in mind as you are going from, you know, your 30s and your 40s. You're in your careers. You're starting to save. You're starting to build these amazing accounts for your financial future. And when you're in retirement, whether you are working retired or not retired fully, be doing the things that you want to be doing, whether you're working for money or you're working because you have a passion, right? You want to be financially free. So the work that you're doing in your retirement should not, and you know, I don't want to say should because that kind of puts a little bit of a negativity to it, but to me, it should be the work that you enjoy, okay? So the point at that stage in retirement is not to be just retired and living the life of collecting a check, but to be doing the things you enjoy. And if that does still mean working, that's fine, but you shouldn't be working to pay the bills anymore. So that should be the goal, okay? And that's pretty much it. So that's going to be my tidbit for the financials at the end here. And then I'm going to pass it on to
All right, so we're in middle adulthood, and for time, I'll keep this brief as well. Our middle adult that we are going to take a look at is at the beginning of the spectrum, but that is Joseph, and he was second in command to Pharaoh. So I won't go through the entire slide, but did want to highlight, so two of the verses that we were going to read, we're not going to read them, but I'll just highlight the titles at the beginning. So we're going to read Genesis 39, verses 19 to 21. And the title for that section in my Bible says, Joseph Tested by Adversity. And then when we go to Genesis 41, verses 37 to 44, the title is Joseph's Exaltation in Egypt. And earlier we spoke about how in this Christian walk, you cannot go your entire life without trials or tribulation or adversity. But the highlight here would be that Joseph would not have been able to make it through those trials and adversity if he did not prepare himself spiritually before those trials came. And there's a quote that says, you don't buy a fire extinguisher while the fire is happening. You buy a fire extinguisher in advance in preparation for if a fire were to happen. And that's the same way that we should treat our spiritual lives. Through praying every day, through connecting with God's word every day, through joining with others in community week by week and as often as we can. Those are the things that we can do to fortify us so that when those spiritual trials come, we can be prepared to handle them.
So first of all, I must say that I'm extremely proud of these young women. And all but four, I knew them when they were in diapers, you know, which is quite amazing. So which is great, great, great. And so I know, Sophia, you said you had to go. 6:15, yes, she has another engagement. So whenever you need to leave, you can leave. But I'm just going to open it up. Oh. Okay, just a few questions, perhaps, maybe a few questions. The mic is there. Gentlemen, you know, I learned so much today. And I know that I'm not alone. You're welcome to ask questions as well. As I know this is for the ladies, but it's open to the gentlemen as well. Any questions?
Good evening. My question is directed to you, Dr. Lubin. Hi, by the way. In regards to perimenopause and menopause, if you are seeking out a GYN and you realize that your GYN isn't really helping you or someone that you know in that area, do you know, what questions should you be asking to the next GYN? Do you ask specifically, hey, do you specialize in menopause or hormonal health? What would be the question that you ask to make sure that you're actually seeing the right professional?
That's a great question, and the reality is that unfortunately the majority of GYNs, this is a place where we're not necessarily taught how to address women in this phase, specifically due to something called the Women's Health Initiative that came out back in 2002. And it really changed the landscape when it came to addressing women's needs when it comes to hormone replacement and how we treat women in menopause. Now the pendulum has swung, I would say, just in recent years, but it does make sense for you to find the provider that says that they are versed in menopause care. And there are resources such as the Menopause Society. You can also, there's an app right now called Peri, which I love because it does give you other resources, but it does take asking questions to your community, talking to your female, friends and family members to find out how did they go through it, who did they talk to, and who in the community has helped them. But yes, it does require someone who understands the transition of perimenopause and menopause in order to really adequately treat it, and also to not be dismissive. I think that's probably the number one problem when we are going through this stage in our lives, is that everything is either dismissed or put on to another doctor. So you start having joint pain and they say, oh, you need to see the orthopedist or the rheumatologist, when in fact, because of our drop in our estrogen levels, that then leads to bone changes and muscle strength changes, as well as the role of testosterone actually in women. So these are some of the things in which, your average doctor may not necessarily be super versed in or may not feel comfortable treating. So you do have very specific questions, and that would be, hi, I think I may be experiencing some changes that are related to perimenopause and menopause. Can you actually help me or direct me to the person who can?
Okay, thank you. If no one else has a question, I have a question about finances. Okay. I have 3 children, and my husband and I do speak to them about finances, even the 5-year-old, right, in a way that they can understand. But for our oldest, who is 13, she wants to be a little bit more independent. Of course, if she goes somewhere with her friends, we give her whatever I do. I give her exactly what I think she's going to need, no more, right? But in the event, like they want to do something else, she doesn't have what she needs, but I didn't give her a card. I want to know, what would you recommend in regards to setting up savings where it cannot be touched, even by myself, and something where she can just make transactions on her own now because she's going to be a little bit more independent?
So I would definitely recommend having a custodial account. Maybe, I don't know if you have access to like a credit union or even with your own bank. You can set up a custodial account for your 13-year-old, and actually all the children, as a matter of fact. Okay. You'll be able to create an account for them where you can put money into, and you would have access to it, but it's not your money, right? So you would be able to access the money if you needed to, but the premise would be to put it away. And so I know through, like, for instance, the credit union, you wouldn't have access to move the money around, like, through your apps or something. So it's not like an easy access. You have to physically go into the bank. And I believe most of the custodial accounts, they pretty much operate the same. So you wouldn't be able to, like, move money around outside of going into the bank and speaking with someone or going to the teller. So that's a very good way to start saving for them. The other thing is, if you have like either Chase or Citibank, one of the more popular banks, they have these child accounts that are actually attached to your account.
Oh, okay.
So you can transfer money into their account. You can actually even organize how you put the money in that account, so how they can spend it.
Oh,
Okay, so with the child account, and they can get this from age, I believe, 11 with Chase. Are you with Chase? Oh, okay. So you should really speak with her. She's. I'll let her. But yeah, that would be my recommendation.
thank
for
you.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so at Chase, we have 3 youth savings accounts. We have Chase First Banking, that's from ages 6 to 17. And then for your 13-year-old, there is high school checkings. So that's from age 13 to 17. And like you mentioned, they have different buckets that you can categorize their spending into. And they get their own card. You're attached to the account as well, so you're able to monitor what they're spending and also set limits on what they're able to spend.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, and I actually recommend this if you have children, because we are moving away from cash, right? So we can teach them how to count money all day, but if they're just going to swipe the card, it's not going to be enough. So you definitely want to get them that experience to using a debit card and understanding that, hey, if you go over your limit, this is your limit, so they can actually see that in their app. And they can also call the number on the back, which is really good because that's also a good habit to have. Check your account, so they'll be able to see that. My son has had his account since he was about your child's age. So 13, he's had his card, and he can go and swipe it, and he has his food allowance. He's got, so now he's 17. He goes out after school with his friends. He knows, okay, I can have Chick-fil-A twice this week, but you get down to Friday, things kind of get a little hairy. So, but that's how he's got a budget, right? So, any other questions? Yes.
What if you have a custodial account for an 18-year-old? You haven't yet given him full authority, but he will be away. How can you still maintain some control? Like, as you said, setting limits. He's 18. Is that possible?
Not really, no. Unfortunately. So the quick fix is to just have a joint account with the child, right? That's the quick fix, because you'll still be able to see everything that they're doing, but you don't have control over it.
I mean, you can.
And honestly, now that he's at the age of majority, which is 18 from what it sounds like, it could either be 18 or 21 depending, you're going to continually get like letters saying that you should transfer the funds over to his, right, because he has reached that age, so.
But you said something earlier about setting limits.
Yeah, so with a child account, you are able to set limits if they're not 18. So, I mean, I could recommend that maybe you have your 18-year-old speak to me, and I can talk to them a little bit about budgeting and having that conversation. But yeah, this is something they kind of got to do on their own.
Yeah. So just a quick thing. I know Sophie and Sandy, you both have to leave.
Yeah.
I can call them that because they're my nieces. But Sophie, you have a weekly podcast, and it's for women's wellness.
Yes.
And one of the things I suggest is maybe if some of the questions maybe you can treat.
Certainly. So actually you can find me on social media at Dr. Sophia OBGYN. I have a podcast called Dr. Sophia OBGYN, Embrace Your Body, Embrace Yourself. I do have some business cards actually that I can leave, which can link you directly to my website. And I do answer or talk about a lot of different topics through things like Instagram and through YouTube, where I talk about a lot of different issues that come up in a woman's life. So please like, subscribe, follow, comment, so that we can get back to you on some of the questions that you may have here tonight or in the future, or giving me more material to talk about. So really thankful to be here this evening.
Thank you,
Uncle
Vivian.
Manny, for the
Appreciate it.
invitation.
Yes. I also have Sunny's cards, so I'll put them outside, and you can just contact them, okay, as needed. All right? So thank you so much, panelists.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, yes, I guess if you have questions for the other three, I'll be, for the time being, if you guys have a few minutes remaining. Yes. Bye, guys. Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Ladies, I thank you very much for the presentation. I don't know if you touched this when I fell asleep, but I must ask you, did you say anything about women who are plagued by men because the women gain weight after childbearing? Did you say something about that and I didn't hear?
Sorry, what? Can you repeat what you just said? Women who are plagued by men?
Yes, because they gained weight after childbearing. And I don't think I heard anything in the 40 to 65 age group that have to deal with women coping with the pounds that keep coming on. I don't think I heard anything about that.
The way you phrased that was very interesting, that
Yeah.
you blamed it on, you said plagued by the
By the
men.
men,
I don't
yeah.
know what they had to do with you gaining the weight, but
My,
I don't know the way it was phrased, but it happens, and I believe Dr. Sophia did mention some of that in relation to menopause. She was speaking about how your body changes, and she said if you even look at the food, you remember when she made that, yeah.
oh,
Analogy.
that
Yes,
was
that
just before I.
Yeah,
that-
she did, but she didn't pinpoint it to one person.
I would like, I'm suggesting that in the podcast or wherever, that give a little handout or something or little tips as to what ladies may do if the grass continues to grow, be more fertile when it hits more water down there.
Okay. Can I say this? I think it's also important to be mindful about your relationship with food. So we have relationships with everything and everyone. So what has been your understanding and your interaction with food in general before the plaguing of the men and then afterwards?
I'm not talking about food.
What are you talking about?
I'm
Gaining
not
weight
talking about-
without eating?
I'm talking about weight gain after childbearing.
Oh, I see. And then the weight just continues to pile on.
And weight gain after you reach age 30.
Okay. Okay.
And those women who go through depression when the men in their lives begin to tell them you're fat.
I see what you, okay. So what I would say, ma'am, sis, is that, okay. Sister Wilkins, I want to address your question. What I would say is that it's important first to make sure you go to your doctor, but then also you have to build your confidence in terms of if you love yourself first and foremost, then the love can come from other people. So he can say, you're fat, you're this, you're that, but essentially, how do you feel? When you look in the mirror, do you feel good? Or
I have a bad habit of asking questions that other women don't ask. My husband is Leopold Wilkins. Yes, I have a bad habit of asking questions that other women are afraid to ask.
like, do I look fat in the dress, or what? What do you mean, other women? What
That's
question?
What I talked about.
She's saying
Because I
at
heard-
panels, she has a habit of doing exactly what she's doing right now, throwing a monkey wrench in. Thank you, Sister Wilkins.
Did anyone else have questions? Yes. We can wrap up with that.
I'd like to know, just listening to Sister Wilkins, how does men plague women when they're fat?
I think you'll have to ask her that. That's a whole AY.
Let me just address something just real quick. First of all, it's not a good idea for any man or woman to
Hold it here. There you go.
check one, to body shame or to devalue anyone because of their size or because of their weight. It's just not right on any level, right? But as Adventists, we understand, and we've been saying this for a long time, that the health message is the right arm of the gospel. So it's not like we're unaware of what we need to do to be healthy and fit. And so I just wanted to say that to the room. It's not necessarily addressing Sister Wilkins' question, but number one, again, it's not right to body shame or demoralize or devalue anyone for their size, male or female. And so if you're having that happen, quickly rebuke that person, number one. And number two, we should know, as more so than anyone, the importance of the health message, because it is the right arm of the gospel. You can convert more people and minister to more people just by showing them how to eat right. Don't we know that? Am I the only one in the room to understand that? And so as we get older, as Adventists, we know what we should be doing. We know what we should not be eating. We know all the terrors of salt and sugar and all these terrible things that plague us. We have obesity, hypertension, and diabetes rampant in our church. And so what we have to do is we have to do a better, we have to be better at addressing these things and really speaking to them. So it's not a man thing. I don't know where that was going, Sister Wilkins, but I think, but you're very brave. You do ask questions that other people are not, who are afraid to courageous, right? Amen. Thank you, Daddy. But yeah, just wanted to, I think that's where she was going. We all love and respect Sister Wilkins and her husband, by the way. Thank you. That's my time.
I think that it's important to consider, even though we have the message, sometimes there is a block. If you are dealing with a mental health issue, you don't know why you're eating the way you're eating. You know better, but you're still doing the wrong thing. So if you realize that there is a problem, or someone has come up and given you unsolicited advice or made some not so nice comments, as a lot of our Caribbean people do. I'm assuming most of you are Caribbean here or have Caribbean roots. So we're very blunt and direct and honest about certain things. It's important, if you can, after surrendering it to God, get accountability. Get a workout buddy, get a food buddy, someone that you can connect with to say, hey, I'm struggling. What did you eat today? How is this going? So on and so forth, and try to make that connection, because no man is an island. You can't do this thing by yourself. Most of us will not have motivation first. It's action, then motivation. There are some people who love getting up at 5:30 in the morning. I'm not one. And going to jog, like that's their thing, right? But for the rest of us, you know, we have to push ourselves. We have to go to the gym. We have to do that because there has to be a sense of urgency. What is your why? So maybe it's an event, and you use that as an incentive. I'm going to this reunion or to this wedding. I'm going to have this goal to lose the weight or to tone or to just stop eating so much sugar, and that's what you gear towards. But you can't do it alone. Surrender to God. Get a buddy if you're struggling to do it by yourself, and continue to build the motivation with action first.